Andrew, do you like free shit? I'm just curious because some people, when they see something's free, they have those, like you say, this is your signature skeptical hippo eyes.
Yeah, skeptical hippo. Exactly. I have skeptical hippo eyes when anything is free. But once I find out it's legit, if it's free, it's me.
Okay, well, let me tell you something that's legit. You know that our favorite electrolyte, element electrolytes that we talk about all the time, they're awesome. You see, in my hand, I have 8 element electrolytes here. Oh my gosh. 8, right?
Ballin'.
Element is going to send you free electrolyte packets, 8 free packets, and all you have to pay for is
$5 shipping.
$5 shipping.
But is there any hoops, any weird things if I've tried it before? Like anything weird?
Nah. Nothing. Literally, they just want to give you 8 packets of these awesome electrolytes, and you just pay for the damn shipping. There's no way that any of you can say, I've never tried element electrolytes, because right now you're going to get it for free.
Absolutely free. Yes, that's right. All you have to do is go to drinklmnt.com/powerproject and claim your element recharge pack absolutely free. All you have to do is pay these measly $5 shipping, but you get to try all these different flavors. Head there right now.
If you don't do this, you're hopeless. What's up, Mark Bell's Proud Project fam? This episode is brought to you by Piedmontese beef. Now, Andrew, you usually like dieting on like high carb, lower fat, and you're doing a lot of Piedmontese, so I need you to tell me about it.
Yeah, dude. So the one steak that I put it above every other steak on the planet is, of course, Piedmontese flat iron steak. Now, if you are familiar with that type of cut, you might be thinking like, no, Andrew's tripping. Like that thing is full of fat. There's no way that you're dieting on that type of steak, especially one that good. But let me tell you the nutritional facts from a flat iron steak from Piedmontese. All right, you ready? 23 grams of protein, 1 gram of fat, 2 grams of carbs.
Can you repeat that, please?
Yep. I just had to double check because even though I know this, I had to double check. 23 grams of protein, 1 gram of fat, 2 carbs.
What the hell?
Tell me what diet that doesn't fit.
I don't know.
Dude, so when you're looking at macros and stuff, especially if you're in more of a bodybuilding type of diet, there's absolutely nothing on the planet that can fit better for you than a Piedmontese flat iron steak. On top of it being like the most amazing nutritional macro-friendly steak, it tastes incredible. I gave one to my father-in-law. He almost had a heart attack, like legit. Like he couldn't understand how it tasted so good. The heart attack was from the excitement, not from like eating meat. That's not what this is all about. But what I'm trying to say is that it's the best steak on the planet. I mean, that's just one of the many steaks, but to me, that's like my #1 steak from Piedmontese beef. For more information, please head over to Piedmontese.com. That's PIEDMONTESE.com. At checkout, enter promo code PowerProject for 25% off your order. And if your order is $99 or more, you get free 2-day shipping.
Who are these Android people nowadays? Right?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I don't know who still uses that. It's green text. It's kind of ghetto.
All right, we're rolling now.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Was that audible?
No, we can.
Well, for all my Android users, I don't like you.
And totally redeemed yourself.
They're the same people that like want to build their own computer. It's like, dude, just relax.
They're the same people.
Why the fuck you want to build your own computer? Just calm down over there. How many fucking bits and megabits and shit do you need? I don't know.
God, makes no sense.
I need faster internet. It's like, come on, bro. Like, just fucking relax.
Just relax.
A Mac's good enough. Okay.
It is. It's good. It's easy. It works. It never gets viruses.
It works
that
every
alone,
time.
The fact that it just doesn't get a virus.
You can watch as much of the weirdest porn that you want and not a single virus.
Wait a second. Porn?
What? I
Porn
didn't say
causes
that.
viruses?
I didn't say that. Does it?
I wonder why all my computers are so fucked up over the years. God damn, I could have saved myself a lot of dough.
Probably.
I'm excited about today's podcast. We're going to talk about breathing, which you wouldn't think would be a magnificent topic, but when you see how many different things it's associated with, poor breathing, you see how many different things it can, you see how many different things it can be attached to, I guess, is the main thing. And even things like diabetes in people that are healthy, it's pretty mind blowing. And today's guest, he'll explain, why a lot of these things have happened. But we've had other guests on the show before, people like Dr. Sean Baker, who've talked about kind of the softening of our palates and the softening of our jaw line and things like that, because we're not eating meat, you know, and we're not eating, and we even if we are eating meat, maybe we're eating like hamburger or processed meats and things like that are much softer than it used to be, rather than like, you know, gnawing something off of a bone, or even like just saying, screw it, I gotta try to eat that bone or break that bone apart and eat whatever's inside of it, because there's not much else food around.
Yeah.
And so we don't eat like that anymore. And so our jaws have softened up, and a lot of people have become mouth breathers, kind of a forward head posture, a softer jawline. And many people just have a hard time breathing in and out of their nose. And it could be detrimental to your health.
It's crazy. Like when I started finding out about this stuff, it's crazy how you see everything collapse on top of each other, from when you're a child to adolescence to teenager to adult. Like if your face forms the wrong way because you eat all these soft foods, you know, you're going to be developing all these breathing problems. And then now, not just that, but nowadays with modern technology, and kids now have like looking down often, having a hard time breathing down in this position. If you're listening, like I'm looking down, like looking at a phone, but being in that position and having a collapsed airway, it's really, really tough on kids. And that's going to develop a lot of later breathing issues. So it's just like, it's now the question is, how do we reverse all of these things within lifestyle, all of these things within diet, so that they don't have these health problems in the future?
Yeah. And also maybe like in a reasonable way, you know, like am I going to, you know, grab a bone-in steak all the time and try to like, you know, chew it off the bone every time? It's like, that doesn't seem like it fits into our culture well, you know? But there are things that you can do. And I'm interested to hear today, about like if these things, how effective these things are. Cause I know there's like things like mewing, where you kind of chew stuff with your tongue. There's, which is just like a practice to try to get your tongue to be stronger, which supposedly can also help impact your breathing in a positive way. And then there's other things of like, I think it's called mastic chewing, which is a specific type of gum.
Oh yeah, it's like there's phalim gum too.
Yeah,
F-A-L-I-M. It's really tough gum.
Yeah, really, really tough gum. It's kind of like, I don't know if any of you have experienced this, like eating beef jerky, where you're like, wow, man, like my jaw's getting like tired from this shit, you know, and you're kind of feeling the impact of that. And so maybe it's similar to that. I've never tried these different gums before.
You okay over there?
Dude, no, you don't. Okay.
Jaw's getting tired?
Just bad jokes, man.
Yep.
Bad jokes.
Or freezing like a protein bar.
Yeah.
Or like a Quest bar. Yeah. That's always fun, because you end up eating those way too fast anyways. But if you freeze it, you get like a really solid jaw workout.
You're trying to like chew it on the sides and shit.
Yeah.
You guys ever had a hot dog and just had low-hanging fruit? Sorry, low-hanging fruit.
Just wanted to see if you could inhale the whole thing.
Yeah, but then, you know, your jaw got sore and tough. See? So this is what low-hanging fruit I had to try. It didn't go, but it didn't work. Okay, let's go.
That's okay. That's okay.
Hey, the podcast is young. We could definitely get in some more penis jokes later.
Yes, most definitely.
Get them in.
Hey now. And then we talked, or then he, you know, this guy also talks a lot about just many different breathing techniques, like Wim Hof type stuff. There's breathing techniques that can make you have some really wild and crazy experiences. It's like breathing where you can, you know, I guess you breathe as hard as you can with music for like 5 minutes straight or something like that. And it's supposed to help your body to produce some DMT, which I think your body produces some DMT as it is. Yeah. But it helps you maybe release a little bit more of it. There's not science behind it, but this is just what people are starting to believe. And one of the things he said on Joe Rogan, which was funny, because I always find it interesting, like what an interviewer gets fascinated by. And he's like, yeah, you know, we did this this type of breathing. And he's like, the guy next to me turned into a wolf.
Yeah, I remember that.
And he's like, the guy next to you turned into a wolf. Like you thought he looked like a wolf. And he's like, no. He thought he was a wolf. And that was freaking, yeah, it was freaking. And he's like, what does that mean? Like, what did he mean? He like thought he turned into a wolf. He's like scratching his crotch and he's like
howling.
Yeah, howling and like trying to hump people and stuff. And
that's awesome.
And Rogan's like, well, maybe the guy's just a dick. Like maybe he's just, you know.
Maybe he's an undercover furry. He's trying to be that.
Or he was just trying to hump people and excuse himself as being a wolf.
He identified.
But I've heard, you know, from other people like Kyle Kingsbury and other people we've had on the show before that these can be experiences that can be game changers for you. I got to be honest, I'm kind of confused by the breathing thing sometimes. Like I'm not really, I remember we've had a couple guests that talk about specific breathing before a fight and things like that. And I'm like, when do you use this kind of breathing versus that kind of breathing? The good thing about our guest today is that he is a journalist. And I think that he represents somebody that's going to be able to explain it to us in a way that's digestible that we can actually utilize.
Yeah. And weren't you saying that James was able to like hold his breath for 3 minutes or something crazy?
I think he can do, I think now he can do like 8 minutes or something.
He just holds it.
Yeah. Well, he said in one session, so he went to a session to like, you know, where they teach you how to breathe and how to hold your breath and stuff. He went from doing 30 seconds to being able to do like 2 minutes, which is pretty crazy. And you start to think about, you know, the different sports that we play, how much can it benefit you to learn how to be in control of that? You know, especially jiu-jitsu, someone chokes you out, you know, or you're on the bottom and you're going against someone who's big and they got a knee in your side and you really can't afford to take a good deep breath anyway. Man, it seems like it's really beneficial. I know my wife with swimming, they do what they call breathing sets, which is no breathing, keep their head down the whole time. And they'll do sets like that, you know, where they go X amount of yards or whatever it might be. It's like, holy shit, man, that sounds, and you don't really hear that in other sports because in other sports, you know, you don't really hear in football. They're like they'll say wind sprints. So, you know, we're running wind sprints, but it's just sprints with short rest intervals. It's not really like you're not trying to run while holding your breath. Yeah. Which could potentially be dangerous, but could potentially have an amazing impact on your training. I've heard people mention this before where you just, you drink some water, you hold the water in your mouth and you run. And then you try to run X distance with that same amount of water in your mouth. That way it's just training you to continue to breathe in and out of your nose. And that's actually sounds a little bit, it sounds like slightly different than taping your mouth shut. You know, taping your mouth shut seems pretty final. You're like, oh man, I got, not that you can't rip it off, but seems a little different than just having the water in your mouth. But we've heard so much great conversation about the nasal breathing and what it can do for you. But there's so many people that suffer from sleep apnea that don't even really know it. They've never really been tested before. And sleep apnea is so dangerous that it can kill you.
That's big in the lifting community too.
Could die in your sleep. I think that's what happened with the great football player Reggie White. He died in his sleep. Yeah. I mean, shit, like, you know, that's about as extreme as it gets right there, right? Dying from it, right?
Yeah. And no, it's like, that's really big within like the bodybuilding, powerlifting community, because like we have big necks and it like a lot of times that can actually constrict your breathing, especially if you're used to not really breathing through your nose often. So it's pretty crazy. But like things with breathing, as far as like breathing in pain, it makes a very big difference. Like, you know, using the exercise bike in here, when you start nasal breathing, or I've noticed this, like, you know, your quads burn on that bike all the time. But if you're controlling your breathing, your nasal breathing, it's like you can handle that soreness and you can just keep that pace going. And I've never been able to do that before until I started, you know, focusing on nasal breathing. It makes a big, big, big difference.
I remember when I was young and I was boxing, you know, I was learning how to throw punches. I was learning some defense and I didn't spar anybody yet. I was just hitting the bag and I was doing some other things. And it's a crazy experience to be, you know, like kind of fighting somebody else, especially I was like 15. So, you know, I'm not, you know, at 15, you feel like you got to really prove yourself. So you just start forgetting all the training that you did and you start throwing wild punches, you know? And so I'm doing all this stuff and we're about like 30 seconds. The guy that I'm going against is experienced. He gives me a good shot to the gut, you know, and he kind of stands back. He was actually a pro fighter. He actually stands back a little bit. He's like letting me wear myself out. He's kind of almost laughing, you know, and then he just gave me, he said, hey, you know, pretend you're hitting the bag. And that just relaxed me a ton. It's like, oh yeah, when I hit the bag, like my coach is telling me, hey, you got to breathe, make sure you continue to move your head. And so that totally relaxed me. And I recognize he's 35 years old and he's a professional boxer.
Yeah.
He's not trying to hurt me. He wants me to get some practice in. He's trying to get some work in as well. And that just really relaxed me, but it got me back to breathing. It's like, oh yeah, like I'm trying to do all this without breathing. Yeah. I wonder why I can't breathe. I wonder why I'm so out of breath.
Yeah. One of the crazy things is, I noticed that in jiu-jitsu too, but the odd thing is, like, when you roll against someone who's really advanced as a white belt, a lot of them are really good at just staying calm naturally, right? But then when you see them roll against somebody who is harder than them, it's like those bad habits of breathing come out. So not only do you need to be able to learn how to breathe correctly when things are easy, so when I'm sparring against a white belt or somebody that's not that hard, yeah, I can keep calm. But also this is coming to the case where, or it's coming, it's been a benefit when I'm rolling with somebody who maybe they're actually better than me, but I can still focus on my breathing, and that makes that process so much easier. No panicking. You're not starting to hyperventilate when they put their knee on your belly and you can't, take deep breaths. If athletes were able to get the hang of this, a lot of them would perform at a much higher level.
What about getting soft tissue work? And you start sweating and you're making all these, faces and noises, and then
tell you to breathe through it.
Yeah, they're like, oh, breathe. And sometimes you can. They're like, sometimes it's really, really difficult. But whenever you can, you tend to relax more. And then it makes you wonder, like, how much better am I receiving that versus me just kind of like being like, don't do that to me.
Yeah.
Like if your body is signaling and it's that stressed, it probably is not cool with whatever's going on. Yeah. I would imagine.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys ever tried like a cold shower, but it's you're instructed to try to breathe calmly through it and keep it cold until you can calmly breathe. It's like, dude, that's impossible for me. Like,
when is this supposed to happen?
Yeah, but I was going to ask, when do you guys think that like nasal breathing will become like a mainstream thing? Like even doing like workouts on the treadmill that I have, like you have coaches guiding you through it. Like on there, they will tell you in through the nose, out through the mouth.
I literally just wrote that.
That's funny. And the thing is, it's probably more like, okay, you're actually like getting a workout in, you're not practicing nasal breathing. But I just found it was odd. Like at every opportunity, they tell you in through the nose, out through the mouth. So I don't know. Do you think like this will catch on eventually, or is it just like something that'll just be kind of niche?
I think if it works, if it's working well and you're hearing more people talk about it, it might be something that catches on. But, we have a lot of great remedies for a lot of things. We got great remedies for like obesity and stuff, and people are fatter than ever. So
true.
It's hard to really, like how normal is the carnivore diet? To us, it seems pretty normal. How normal is keto diet? It seems pretty normal, but you get into like Tennessee or Oklahoma or something, these people at these
that's it, Mark. I supported you this whole time. I'm from Tennessee.
Yeah, right?
I'm out.
Yeah, some of these areas, they're probably just they're still eating their grits and still eating their whatever they're used to. Hey. Grits are from the South, I guess.
I'm joking.
That's so funny. I don't know. You remember that movie, My Cousin Vinny?
Right.
And he goes to the Nsima, you would love this movie.
That's a great movie.
I'm gonna write it down. I'm gonna watch it for you too.
But he goes into the
two Utes.
He goes into that restaurant and the menu just has, he tells Marissa Tomei, he's like, I guess I'm going to go with the breakfast because the menu just has breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah.
And so he asks what the breakfast is and, explains it has grits. And he's like, what's a grit? It was so funny, dude. That movie's great. You should watch it.
I will.
Ralph Macchio.
Amazing. In the nose, out the mouth thing, I think a lot of times it's just to have people try to calm down. I think is part of it. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with any of that. Maybe our guest today will tell us why he may think that's wrong. You have a lot of breaths during the day. So I think that what he's trying to preach and what many other people are trying to preach is work on breathing in and out of your nose as much as possible. If things get uncomfortable, it might be a good idea for training purposes to try to continue to go in and out of the nose. And then once you're, too uncomfortable, maybe you start breathing, doing some in the nose, out the mouth type stuff. But a lot of people are congested. They don't really breathe well. And so Wim Hof is like, I don't care if you breathe through your asshole, because he's like, a lot of people just are not, you know, their noses are kind of clogged up and they have smaller nasal passages and stuff like that. And he's like, just whatever way you can, because he knows that you breathe, you know, probably 50,000 times a day or something like that. And if it's the 30 Wim Hof breaths that you're taking that are in the nose and out the mouth, or however you do it, just all in and out of the mouth, it probably is not going to have a negative impact. I do think that a lot of people want to seek what's optimal, but not everybody. So I don't think that this will be like, I don't know if it'll end up being like a real mainstream thing unless we see more studies on it that are really showing like how, you know, how detrimental is this?
Honestly, like, yeah, like to that point, I think the only time when it's going to get mainstream is when we start seeing it on something like Dr. Oz, or we see Oprah talk about it and talk about how she has to fix her breathing. Because, you know, the whole in through the nose, out through the mouth thing is something that my old soccer coaches would say, because that, like, even nasal breathing wasn't like something popular then. And with all the issues that people will already have nasal breathing, like you said, a lot of people are just naturally congested, right? They can't take no breaths through the noses. It's much easier, and it's a lesser barrier to entry to just say, just breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. Or if you can't breathe through your nose, just breathe through your mouth and just try to breathe consistently. Even though it's not the best thing to do, it's the best way that we can, I guess, make some sort of change without having to, you know, individually see what everyone's problem is.
Yeah, for me in my training, you know, once the training starts to get really hard, I'll do, you know, I'll breathe in and breathe out kind of when I'm supposed to, in through the nose and out through the mouth. But a lot of times I'm trying to push that a little bit. So like in my warm-ups and stuff, I'll you know, try to just go in and out of the nose. If I'm doing, you know, machine type of work, I will probably try to keep it all nasal breathing. I forget here and there. I'm going to go back to, you know, breathing in and out of the, or using my mouth more, but it just depends. It depends on the day, depends on what I'm trying to do. But for me personally, I've found like a calming effect in my day-to-day. And even with using the mouth tape for sleep, which we've mentioned many times on the show, I tape my mouth for sleep. It's supposed to help you get more optimal sleep. I've noticed that when I don't have the mouth tape on, then I don't wake up with drool all over my pillow like I used to, because I think I'm getting more used to using my nose. I don't really know, but and I think it has helped my sleep. It's annoying to do it, you know. I don't enjoy like taping my mouth shut every night to do it, but I like to do things that are optimal, or at least attempt them.
Yeah, I still break through my mouth tape. Like, it's funny, I guess. So sometimes it'll like slightly come off. Sorry.
Do you tape this way or this way?
It's hard.
Oh,
You
this
got
way.
Oh, you tape this way?
Yeah, along with hot dog hamburger. I don't know. Yeah.
You have a beard, so it's got to be tough. And both of you guys have hair. Like as soon as my hair starts to grow in, then the thing falls off.
Yeah. It's weird because like it'll slightly come off, and I'll still fight it. And so Stephanie is like, you make so many weird sounds when you like are exhaling, because it's like wee wee. So she gets a kick out of it. But I don't know. I've tried like doubling up on the tape, and I still bust through it.
I found like with my beard, like usually a lot of the times it'll break this way. But if I tape this way, which might seem odd, and listeners, it's just like, actually, I don't know how to explain this to you if you're
vertical?
Not watching. Yes. If you tape
up and down.
If you tape up and down versus
hot
side
dog
to side.
or hamburger style.
Hot dog or hamburger.
Because all you need is your lips just to be like pinched together.
And it's more like of a cue, right? Like,
Yeah. It makes a difference.
I'll
it doesn't
try
fall off nearly as much for me, actually, ever.
Okay.
Anymore.
Do you have just like a little thing of mouth tape, or is it a specific brand or anything?
I got the 3M micropore tape, as it's like, you know, very inexpensive. Like a pack of
you just cut it.
Yeah, and a pack of 12 of those is like $10.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
it works.
And it's available everywhere. Like you go to Walmart, you get a 2-pack for like, I think like $3.
Dude, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's perfect.
Yeah, micropore tape.
3M micropore tape. Look at that up on Amazon, or like you said, go to Walmart and check it out.
There was one that I was getting. It was like I forgot what it was, but it was when we were in LA, and I had let you use it, and and it like had fallen off. I'm like, yeah, that one's not as sticky. The micropore is way better.
I will say this, before we get into this podcast, this topic of breathing is something that I love so much because as an athlete, I've noticed the differences I had when I was playing sports and cardio versus the way I am now with jujitsu. It literally, no shit, feels like a superpower.
That's awesome.
It really feels like a superpower. It makes the biggest difference. And it's crazy. So you got to take it seriously and pay attention to the man we have on today.
Hey guys.
Hey.
What's happening? How are you?
We're doing fantastic. Great to have you on the show today. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking your time.
For sure. Thanks for having me.
We've been talking about, breathing and sleep and all different kinds of stuff on this show for quite some time. We like to try to do stuff as optimal as we possibly can. In some of your experience, why do you think that sometimes, like a lot of us are into lifting weights, why do you think a lot of times people that lift weights end up with sleep apnea, they end up with trouble, or maybe they run into some issues with breathing properly and things like that? Do you think it has a lot to do with, like for us, we power lift in particular, do you think it has some stuff to do with, I don't know, like the grittiness of what it is that we're doing, and maybe we never really were taught the proper way to breathe, something along those lines?
Yeah, so many weightlifters are paying attention to, their health, their metabolism, their muscles, obviously, but they aren't paying attention to their breathing. And what happens is when we develop too many muscles around here, we can actually start blocking our airways. Our airways can get obstructed. So when you see a lot of weightlifters, traditional pose is to have the neck out like this. So that allows you to get more air into your body. If you think about someone, a ENT who is like EMT rather, who is doing CPR on someone, they take their hand on the back of the neck and crane their head out to open the airway. So that's what's been happening with a lot of weightlifters. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of weightlifters have heart problems or blood pressure issues because they have obstruction in their airways.
I'm really curious about your take on this, because from what Mark was saying, yeah, that is a big problem within the weightlifting community. But the solution that a lot of people seem to find is grabbing a sleep apnea machine, which I'm curious on your take on it, because that seems like it's just kind of a Band-Aid to the bigger issue. So do you think that using a sleep apnea machine can be beneficial in the long run? And if not, or if so, like what can they do instead to transition themselves to actually fixing their breathing?
Cpaps are lifesavers. So without a doubt, for people who can't breathe, who have been suffering from obstructive sleep apnea, which is so injurious to the body on every single level, these allow you to breathe at night. But you're 100% correct when you say this is doing nothing for the core problem of having an obstructed airway. It's a Band-Aid. It's a fantastic Band-Aid. It's a life-saving Band-Aid, but it's not fixing the core problem. So just the way that we work out our biceps or abs or whatever, we should be considering that we have this big muscle tube, right? In our throats. This is all a muscle tube, and you should work that out as well. And there's a lot of scientific evidence showing that by doing simple exercises with your tongue, these things called oral pharyngeal exercises, you can influence the fitness of your throat. I know this seems totally crazy, but this has been proven and studied for years and years. So I would put in 15 minutes of throat exercise. They look really weird. I won't demonstrate in front of you guys right now, but they work.
So like, do you just should we just look up oral pharyngeal exercises and on YouTube and something might pop up?
Yeah, don't look on YouTube. You're going to get a bunch of garbage. In the scientific literature, there are various studies. There's one that was put out in Chest journal, very respected scientific journal, that found it significantly decreased snoring and sleep apnea. I'm not saying this is going to work for everyone. Apnea can occur in the nasopharynx and the hypopharynx all over the place, but it's free. And if anything, it's going to allow you to breathe better throughout the day. And who doesn't want that?
I've heard you discuss on some other shows, how you got into some of this. How did we get to this point where we even need your services, where we even need a book about breathing? How did we end up here?
Yeah, as a science journalist, the last thing I ever thought I would be doing was to be writing a book about breath. And a lot of my friends gave me a bunch of crap about this early on. You're writing a book about breathing? And until you start really getting into the nitty gritty of it, where I became convinced that there was a larger story here, was to learn that the human face has been evolving characteristics that are not at all advantageous to our health. By that, I mean, for the last 300, 400 years, our mouths have been growing smaller and smaller and smaller. And what happens when you have a mouth that's too small for your face, your teeth grow in crooked. Teeth have nowhere to grow in straight, so they grow in crooked. Another thing that happens, and I'm a great example of this, is the upper palate here of your mouth, which is right here, can push into your sinuses and can obstruct your breathing. So we become the worst breathers in the animal kingdom just in the past 300, 400 years.
And other animals don't have crooked teeth, right?
No. I mean, unless you've got like some bulldogs or pugs or these highly inbred brachycephalic dogs, they breathe terribly and they suffer from a lot of the same problems that we do. If you've seen a bulldog breathing, it's just... I mean, it looks like a lot of people, working out around the park where I live. So beyond these highly inbred dogs, any animal in the wild is going to have perfectly straight teeth. And all of our ancestors had perfectly straight teeth. So we're the only ones, modern humans, to suffer from these problems. When
it comes to exercise, we were talking about a little bit earlier on the show, like when it comes to something like running, we've heard over the years, breathe in the nose and out the mouth. Do you feel that this is wrong? And if it's wrong, what are some reasons on why it might be wrong?
So the exhale is less important, but we lose 42% more moisture breathing out through our mouths. So I live in a city here, and because gyms are all closed, everyone's out running all the time. I see these people running around with their mouths wide open, and they're also maybe carrying a water bottle, 16 ounces of water here, and sometimes they're wearing a little belt or a little backpack and hitting off this water, but their mouths are open. I mean, you might as well just put a little hole at the bottom of this water bottle and just spill out this water, because you're just losing so much of your moisture. So from what I've seen, from what I've researched, inhaling and exhaling through the nose is the way you need to breathe. And you see this from top runners. You see this from sprinters. They're inhaling and exhaling through the nose. To be clear, if you're like about ready to dunk a basketball, you look at Michael Jordan right before he dunks on someone, he goes, takes this huge breath of air. That's totally fine. He's about to dunk on someone. But I guarantee the rest of the time, he's breathing through his nose, because it's really hard to be healthy if you're a mouth breather.
So this makes me really curious, because I've heard you talk about your transition, right? I think you've mentioned that you were breathing the wrong way for much of your life, and it was a little bit hard for you to actually start breathing through your nose, especially as an adult. So when someone's trying to make this transition, what type of journey should they expect if like their nose is clogged up, their nasal passages are maybe smaller than they actually should be? Can someone actually make a full transformation as an adult as far as being able to fully nasal breathe and take advantage of their nose?
Well, when you switch over from being a mouth breather to a nasal breather, it sucks. It takes a long time. It's miserable. You think it's not going to work out. That was certainly my story. It was the story from so many people that I've heard from. So, breaking a habit takes a long time, especially if you've been doing one for decades and you think it's just normal. I would go to sleep every single night, didn't matter if I was in a hotel room or if I was camping or whatever, with a huge glass of water by my bed, because I would keep waking up with this dry mouth. I'd hit some water, go back to sleep, wake up, dry mouth, hit some water, on and on and on. So everyone's got a slightly different problem. So I can't offer a blanket prescription or blanket guidance, but what we do know is you have to breathe through your nose, period. Your body is never, ever really going to be able to operate efficiently or correctly if you're a mouth breather. So how you get to that is really up to you. I found that just training myself using a little piece of tape during the day. I know this sounds stupid, but it's no more stupid than mouth breathing. Helped me train to become a nasal breather. At night, I'd use the same little piece of tape. I learned about this from a Stanford doctor, and I learned about this from several other doctors who had been suggesting this to their patients for decades. So some people can do that. Some people do need surgery. A small percentage of people absolutely need surgery, and surgery is life-changing for them. But what I've found is we've got a pretty amazing body that is so adaptable if we just learn how to use it in the correct ways. And so start with these easy, free steps first before you go directly in and get your nose drilled out.
Ooh. What did your own study show when you stuffed your nose? You packed your nose for a while, and I think you maybe had a couple other people do it as well. What did that show? What negative impacts did that have on your health? Because a lot of times we're talking about performance, but you're talking about just like overall health and your blood sugar and how breathing improperly can negatively impact all these things.
Yeah, so I had been talking with the chief of rhinology research down at Stanford, this guy named Dr. Jayak Arnayak, one of the world leaders in this field, big nose guy. And so he knows of all of the advantages of breathing through the nose. The nose serves something like 30 different functions. It's the way for us to filter out crap in the air. It's a way for us to slow down air, to heat it, to moisten it, so that when that air reaches our lungs can more efficiently extract oxygen. This is important when you're just sitting in front of a Zoom call, and especially when you're working out. You want to be operating efficiently. You don't want to be spending unnecessary energy doing something. So we know all that. It's not controversial. And we also know all the damage caused by mouth breathing, increased risk of respiratory problems, neurological problems, developmental problems. When you're a mouth breather as a kid, your skeleton can actually change. It's so common, it's called adenoid face. You see these kids like me, I'm a great example, with a long face, small mouth. This is because I was breathing through my mouth when I was a kid. I didn't know that it was a wrong thing to do. So we know all that, but what we didn't know is how quickly the damage from mouth breathing came on. And so through various conversations, I said, Nayak, you're at Stanford, man, one of the top research institutions in the world. Why don't you study this? And I finally convinced him, and we put together a 20-day study in which me and one other person were to be obstructed for 10 days just to become mouth breathers. And then for the other 10 days, we would just be breathing through our noses, and we'd be collecting data the whole way through. And I know that this sounds like some sort of supersize me jackass stunt. It really wasn't, considering that 25 to 50% of the population habitually breathes through the mouth. So we were just lulling ourselves into a position so many people already know. We were measuring it. That's the difference.
And when you guys did that, like when your noses were plugged, what type of issues happened to you? And before that, were you already practicing nasal breathing, or were you doing mouth breathing before?
Yeah, I had become aware of all the damage caused by mouth breathing. So I had been adjusting my breathing for a while before then, for sure. So that's what made this even more difficult to do.
Yeah.
It sounds bad. It sounds like it'd be a real pain. You have no idea. It was so awful. And we knew it was going to be awful. So that was no surprise. But what we didn't know was how quickly the damage was going to occur. And we didn't know what the data was going to say. And, you know, my blood pressure went through the roof. I went from not snoring at all to snoring. After a few days, I was snoring for 4 hours a night from zero. We both got sleep apnea. We were fatigued. We were miserable. Athletic performance went down. I mean, a whole laundry list of problems. It was a long 10 days. It was awful. And every, you know, at the beginning, we're kind of cracking up. We're like, this is so stupid. You know, but by day 8, we were not in a good way. So when we flipped that was a good thing. Then we had 10 days of like breathing healthy, breathing through our noses. Blood pressure went down about 25 points right off the bat.
Wow.
Snoring decreased in the first night. A few days later, 0 snoring. So we went from, at our worst, snoring 4 hours a night to zero sleep apnea. And, you know, I just don't hear a lot of people talking about the difference between the pathway through which we breathe air and how that affects our snoring, how that might affect sleep apnea, how that affects our blood pressure. You just don't hear about it. And it's one of the simplest things to do.
Were there some other things that you guys were able to record? Were you able to record like blood glucose? And was there any, did you have any evidence towards like noticing more cravings? We talk on the show about sleep quite a bit, and we notice that when we fall behind in our sleep, our decision making isn't as good. And for us, that sometimes ends up us eating pizza or ice cream or something like that. So what are some things you might have noticed along those lines?
Yeah, so we had continuous blood sugar monitors, glucose monitors on the whole time. We took 60 different blood markers before, during, and after. And we know that sleep apnea is directly connected with adult onset diabetes. Direct relation there. So when you're choking on your breath, on your own body, you know, you're stressing yourself out. Adrenaline shoots up, cortisol shoots up, blood sugar shoots up, insulin resistance can come as a result of that. And we know all that, but that probably will take months or even years of dysfunctional breathing. So we saw no difference on blood sugar at all. It was consistent. And a lot of the other blood markers, ionized calcium, all this other crap, we didn't see any difference. But with stress markers, with cortisol, absolutely. And with some other blood markers for sure. But you know, I think a lot of that, this was only 10 days. And to see how it affected our ability just to think. I mean, Anders, who was from Sweden, came out here, paid to come out here and do this study because we had to pay for this at Stanford. He actually got lost when he was mouth breathing. He couldn't make his way back to his apartment that he rented across the street from my house. He was really embarrassed about it. He didn't have that problem, nasal breathing. So I'm not saying mouth breathing is, you know, it's going to ruin the health of everyone instantaneously. I'm not saying that nasal breathing is going to cure all your problems, but we absolutely know that there's a huge foundation of science showing that just the pathway through which you breathe is going to affect you in the long term for sure.
Have you noticed anything in regards to nasal breathing helping with something like allergies? I know for myself, if I'm out and about and then I get home, my nose will be stuffed up. And so when I hit the bed, I'm like, oh, there's no way I can tape my mouth right now. But then I focus on just breathing through my nose. And then like those pathways kind of open up and it's like, whoa, like what changed? Like something weird happened. And then I can, you know, tape my mouth for the rest of the night. But have you been able to kind of find a correlation between those two?
Yeah, so the nose is a use it or lose it organ. The less we use it, the less we're going to be able to use it. So much so that down at Stanford, I was talking to Dr. Ann Kearney, and she had gotten curious about this as well. So she had chronic nasal breathing problems. She had allergies, bunch of other issues, and she was slated for surgery. And this is a clinician, you know, that this is an expert in the field. And she thought, I wonder if I just start to breathe through my nose a little more, what would happen? So she looked at records from people who had laryngectomies, which is a hole drilled in their throat because they had mouth cancer or some other issue. She found that between 2 months and 2 years, their noses were 100% clogged. And she thought if that were the case, if she just conditioned herself to breathe through her nose more, would it open? And she became an obligate nasal breather after a couple of weeks. Again, not saying this is going to work for everyone, but our noses are covered with erectile tissue. They're covered with the same erectile tissue as you know where, and it responds in the same way. So the more you use your nose, the more it will become conditioned to breathe more easily. And next time you have allergies, to answer your question directly, absolutely breathing techniques, breathing through the nose, breathing slowly, breathing in a paced manner can definitely have an effect on allergies. Yeah. And a little trick, next time your nose is stuffed, calmly exhale, hold your nose, your nostrils shut, hold your breath until you feel a pretty potent sense of air hunger. When it's time to breathe again, breathe through your nose. And then take about 30 seconds worth of breaths and repeat that about 5 to 6 times. And I think you'll be amazed how quickly your nose will clear up. That congestion will go away.
Awesome. Thank you.
I was really curious. about this. You were mentioning how, our face has changed because of like a lot of things currently. Could be our diet, could be, looking down all the time. But for you yourself, have you done other things as far as the realm of the foods you eat and the type of foods you eat? Since, modern individuals, we eat a lot of soft foods that mess with the structure of our face over time. Have you changed your diet in any way that has allowed you to, over a longer period of time, see a difference in your facial structure? And also, from your years of, starting to focus and practice nasal breathing, have you noticed a visible difference in the way your face is structured? Just because, when you're reading on forums about things like mewing and all of this stuff, people tend to say as an adult, it's very hard to do that.
It is hard to do that when you're an adult because things are more set, right? Your skeleton is much more set, but that doesn't mean you can't do it. So a lot of these problems, if we were just able to diagnose them and intervene on them early, we wouldn't have these issues, right? A lot of this is tied to chewing stress when we're young. Infants who are breastfed versus those who are bottle fed will have be much more less apt to suffer from snoring and sleep apnea. We know this. Their faces will grow differently. If you are pulling, like breastfeeding takes a lot of stress, right? So, and when you are quickly developing, if you're doing that every 2 hours or whatever, you are literally pulling your face out. You're allowing your mouth to grow wider. So anecdotally, I've heard from so many friends who've had a few kids, and some of them were bottle fed, some of them were breastfed. The ones who were breastfed don't need any braces. They're perfectly straight teeth. The ones who were bottle fed all need braces. So I was bottle fed. I asked my mom about it. She's like, no one was breastfeeding when you were born, So this isn't pointing fingers or blaming anyone. I'm a dude. The last thing I'm going to do is tell people that they need to breastfeed, every 2 hours. Not going to happen. But what I am going to say is that, if you think about it, the body, when it's young, is developing. You're creating the foundation for how you're going to look and how you're going to form later on. And so the more positive inputs you have, the better you're going to form. And that's certainly the case with breathing. So now more directly to your question, I'm really rambly today. Sorry about that. So when we're adults, like everything's set, nonetheless, we can still change our facial structure. We can influence the bone mass in our faces through chewing stress. And if you have a clean thumb, no COVID thumbs here, you can place your thumb to the roof of your mouth, and right in the middle of your roof of your mouth is a suture. So it's a crack. It's the same crack that's in your head, right? We have all these different cracks in our head, which allow our skulls to expand. We have one in our mouth, and at virtually any age, you can influence that to open up a little more, and you can widen your palate. So when you talk about these people who are mewing, I've seen some of that crap on YouTube, and some of it's lighting, and some of it might be even digital manipulation. But I'm convinced that some of it is actually happening. What you're doing is you're building musculature, but you're starting to influence the size of your palate. So it's an easy thing to do. Just measure before and after doing mewing. Instead of saying I look better, I breathe better, measure it, and then it's objective. And that's one thing I wish more people would start doing. Do what I did and take a CAT scan a year before and a year after, and then you have measurements. I gained about 15% more space in my airway after a year. And I'm middle-aged, I'm old. So that's inspiring that anyone can really do this if you spend the time to do it.
Is there some particular techniques that you utilize, like upon waking up every morning or before going to bed? Is there anything in particular that you practice in terms of breathing, or are you more kind of along the lines of just continue to work on nasal breathing throughout the day?
Yeah, it has to do with the latter of the two. I've been super insanely busy. When I calm down, I'm going to be incorporating more breathing exercises throughout the day, throughout the week. I still do it I'll do Wim Hof method, which you call it Wim Hof method. This stuff's been around for thousands of years. I'll do that about 3 or 4 times a week. I'll do some Sudarshan Kriya. I'll practice breathing slowly. But most of all, most benefits come from breathing normally. And what I mean by that is breathing through your nose, not over breathing, focusing your breath, breathing deep, breathing light. You know, that's where most people are going to get most benefits. You can do these other practices, and there's definite benefits tied to those as well. But the point is, we've been breathing so dysfunctionally for so long, and people don't realize it because this is an unconscious act. But once you take control of it, it really transforms your body and in your life in so many ways.
You know, I had a thought about, and I'm really curious what your take is on this. Like a while ago, and I was thinking about it again today when you mentioned how babies that are breastfed, you know, they tend, like, you had that family member or something that said that none of the babies that were breastfed had to get braces, but the ones that were bottle fed did. And do you think that if we were to figure out a way to massively change the structure that, like, you know, children are raised, the food they eat, the habits they have as far as, you know, sitting down and staring at screens constantly, do you think that dentistry would at some point become slightly obsolete? Not totally gone, but obsolete? Because even having wisdom teeth pulled, I have a lot of relatives who are in Nigeria, and you know, I guess they don't do things like they do here, but none of them, because, you know, they were breastfed, they were active, they were outside a lot, they weren't on phone screens because they didn't really use phones like that. No one had to get their wisdom teeth pulled, and no one had dental issues. But I do have some cousins that did a lot of the things that you were mentioning and had a lot of those habits, and they had all these dental issues. So there seems to be something there where I'm just like, dentistry seems to feed off of a lot of modern problems.
Yeah, isn't that creepy once you start noticing this stuff?
Yeah.
And I really became interested in this stuff about 4 or 5 years ago, you know, looking at ancient skulls and seeing how perfect our ancestors were. And there's just such this clear line between when we were perfect, at least our skeleture, and what's happened to us today. But there is this huge movement in dentistry that's happening right now, and it's a bit of a show to watch it from the sidelines, where people are saying this exact thing you just said. They're saying braces, these are preventable problems. The vast majority of diseases and problems that are afflicting modern humans today are preventable. So I'm not talking about genetic neuromuscular issues. You know, those aren't preventable. That's something that's passed down. But the vast majority of if you're looking at diabetes, if you're looking at obesity, if you're looking at even crooked teeth, these are preventable problems. So this new branch of dentistry, which isn't new at all, dentists have been doing this for a long time, but now it's really coming up. They're looking at kids who are like 1 year old, 2 years old. They're looking at their breathing. They're looking at their mouths. They're looking at how they're developing, and they're creating interventions at this early age to widen their mouth so their profiles grow properly, so their airways grow properly. Because again, it's about building on a foundation that's already healthy. Once that foundation is screwed up, it's harder to edit it and influence it. But it's much easier preventative maintenances. And this is what they're doing. It's called functional dentistry, myofunctional therapy. And I've seen some of their case studies of kids who are like 4 years old, had extreme sleep apnea, snoring, allergies, asthma, because they couldn't breathe. And they would take scans of their heads, and their airways were the size of a drinking straw. And then a couple years later, with these interventions, they've gained like twice the amount of space in their airways. No sleep apnea, no snoring, no ADHD, no asthma, no allergies, which makes perfect sense. But instead, we're more conditioned here to give a kid 5 different drugs for 5 different problems without looking at the core issue. And the core issue is often, not all the time, but it's often tied to breathing dysfunction.
It's crazy. You guys are pointing out, with everything. And of course, you guys I have a baby on the way, and I do have an older daughter. But you know, I remember in school looking around and seeing like, oh, like man, that kid has to wear braces. Like I got lucky. Like I don't have. Like I thought it was just like you were predestined to like as soon as you were born. But in some of those studies, did they share any techniques on how they were able to get some of the kids to kind of transition over to nasal breathing? Because like I said, I have one that's due technically any day now, and I have an older one, and I do my best to try to, you know, encourage her to breathe through her nose. But every now and again, I'll look over and I'll be like, hey, chin up and close your mouth. But, you know, obviously I'm not like, you know, I'm not great at it because she'll still do it. But do you have any advice for some of us parents that do have some older ones that, you know, we kind of like weren't paying attention and they've gone to the way of the mouth breathers?
Sure. So first of all, one thing that I learned from the biological anthropologists I was working with at University of Pennsylvania is these are now becoming heritable traits. So sometimes right out of the gate, a kid has a mouth that's too small for its face, regardless of breastfeeding and bottle feeding. And they have breathing problems right out of the gate because this is what's happened to our species. So the important thing is to recognize that issue and to make immediate interventions to it. And you do that by finding a qualified person, a pediatric dentist, who this is what they're looking at. So dentistry is moving much more, at least this one segment of dentistry, is much more moving into the direction of airway health as well. Who spends the most time looking at airways? A dentist does. And yet dentists haven't been empowered before to prescribe different interventions for airway health. So my father-in-law is a pulmonologist, and I thought, you know, pulmonologists, they spend the most time looking at breathing. They do not. They spend the most time looking at breathing pathologies. So if you get, you know, shot with an arrow through your lung, if you get in a car accident, if your lungs collapse, go to a pulmonologist. They're going to fix you up. They're going to do some incredible stuff. But if you're looking at regular breathing health and airway health, no one has really taken that under their arm in all of these different medical disciplines. And dentists are the ones that are starting to do that. So now to answer your question as far as what you can do, the first thing I would do is have one of these qualified people look at the kid for their airway health right off the bat. And then after that, I mean, we just do what our ancestors did. Why did our ancestors all have these perfectly straight teeth and these huge airways? Because they were breastfed. That's one thing. Because when they moved from breastfeeding to eating, they weren't eating Gerber's, you know, canned stuff. They went straight to hard food. So it's called baby-led weaning, where you just go directly from being fed to eating hard food. It's pretty sketchy because the kid's like choking and all this stuff at the beginning. But this is before their larynx has really fallen. So it's much harder for them to. And anyway, there's this whole school called baby-led weaning. And so that allows them at this early age to really start grinding it out, right? And to start using their jaw muscles and developing this good bone structure. And then for kids later on in life, it's all about creating positive habits, as you mentioned. It's one thing for, you know, you'd be the dad and be like, shut your mouth, like, sit over there. It's another thing for a kid to want to do this. I've found that the most effective thing is to show them pictures of kids who are mouth breathers later on in life and kids who are nasal breathers later on in life. And mouth breathers will have a different facial structure. Just tell them they won't be as popular if they're a mouth breather later on in life. Another thing you can do, this stuff is created by Patrick McEwen. I think it's fantastic. It's called Mayo Tape. This sounds super weird, but if you don't want to put tape on a kid's mouth, and maybe you do sometimes, and that's up to you. I'm not going to demonstrate because that's just getting a little too weird. This goes around the mouth, right? And so that kid can open their mouth at any time. It just gently trains them to keep the mouth shut. And some of my friends use this for their kids. They say, you can watch TV, but as long as you're watching TV, you're chewing gum and you're keeping your mouth shut, you know, with Mayo Tape or otherwise. So those are a few things you can do.
Like a muzzle.
That's a great idea.
Little bit.
Have you noticed any positive impact from chewing any of these like I think it's called like Mastic Chewing or these types of gum. Have you utilized any techniques like that or noticed anyone getting any benefit from anything like that?
Yeah, it's hard to say because if there were two versions of me and one of them didn't chew and then the version of me who did chew, we could compare them. But I'm a big fan of this freaky Turkish gum called Falim, sugar-free gum. It's hard as a freaking rock. It doesn't taste so hot, but man, it gives you a workout. And Falim's been sold out. I think Falim is wondering what the hell is going on because they were sold out on Amazon for a couple of months, but I think they're back in stock now. So, but all you need is, you don't need this stuff if you just ate normal food, if you just ate whole foods. And this is something that I find is so funny. It's like, we put treadmills in our houses to exercise, which is good to move around, to walk in one place. We put weights in our houses to pick up a weight and put it back down. We create supplements and goo powders and all this other stuff. But we wouldn't need this stuff if we just lived in a lifestyle like our ancestors did, right? So there's a reason why you look at hunter-gatherers, they're ripped, man. They've got great abs, they're muscular, perfectly straight teeth. So they're not doing push-ups. It's just part of their lifestyle in which they're walking around a lot. They're chewing real foods all the time. They're sleeping 8 hours a night. So I know that's not possible in the modern world, where a lot of people live. And I'm a huge fan of exercise. I have all this crap in my house as well, but it just goes back to the basics. Eat carrots, right? Eat celery, eat chewy stuff, eat stuff our ancestors would have eaten. And if you can't do that, if you're in airport land or whatever, I'm a fan of this gum. Falim gum is what it's called. And it comes in such delicious flavors as carbonate and mint grass. So have fun with that.
Quick question, in terms of, because I have that gum. I had it for a while now. When you chew it, do you try to, because maybe this might sound stupid, but I'm kind of wondering, if you tend to chew more on one side than the other, if you'll start to develop more on one than the other, like, do you pay attention to how many times you chew on each side, or do you put gum on each side and go down on
what's the set rep scheme?
What's the set rep scheme?
Well, I will consult the Falim interval training requirements here. So what happens naturally is the body builds to symmetry. So there are no genes designed to build to asymmetry. The body's going to build to symmetry. So as long as you're not grinding away for 8 hours a day, just only on one side, you're gonna be fine.
All right.
If you think about eating a big piece of steak or even eating a carrot or Falim, you don't chew with both of sides of your back molars. You're not chewing steak like this unless you've got like some serious problem, You're chewing on one side and then you're switching it and you're chewing on the other and then you're switching it. So when we chew this way on one side or the other, we elicit a parasympathetic response, which calms us down. It allows more saliva to enter our mouths. It allows us to digest more easily. So, I would suggest, I wouldn't freak out about it if you're like, I did 12 chews instead of 10. I need to do 10 on the other side. Your body's going to figure it out. Just be sure that you're chewing normally and you're not trying to focus. If you think you're underdeveloped on one side, don't go overboard. Like, the body will build to symmetry if you let it.
Can you share with us some of the experiences you've had with utilizing some other breathing techniques where you have maybe kind of changed or offset some chemicals in your mind or in your brain rather, and have had just some interesting experiences? The one you were telling, I think on Joe Rogan's show, where he said somebody turned into a wolf. That gives us an idea of how impactful breathing can really be and what it can do for us. So you mind sharing some of that with us?
Yeah, my day job gets pretty weird sometimes. There's various breathing techniques and practices. And in my book, instead of detailing 400 of them, like, you pick up a book in pranayama and there's like 400 practices. They all have these crazy names. You're like, where do I begin? I kind of put them in these buckets, right? First, there's this healthy breathing that everyone should do. It doesn't matter if you're an asthmatic or an ultra marathoner or a weightlifter or have anxiety, whatever. We're all going to benefit from breathing through the nose, becoming aware of your breathing, breathing slowly, breathing in a paced, rhythmic way. Everyone will benefit from that. Then from there, you can get a little more specific. So these more intense breathing practices like holotropic breath work was the one I mentioned on Rogan's show. There's also Sudarshan Kriya. There's also Wim Hof method. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that. So I put these all kind of in the same bucket because they're all doing the same thing. If you look at the science and the studies of the benefits of these, people are being impacted in the same way. So what these practices do is they purposely stress your body out. So they allow you to, like this pressure release valve, to get all your stress out in this very controlled space. And then for the rest of the day, you can chill out and actually act normally and not unconsciously like grind your teeth or hold your shoulders up really high or have high blood pressure and have your heart racing all the time. It just blows that out. I'm a huge fan of these because the science, Sudarshan Kriya, there's 100 independent studies, some of which were done at Harvard, like legit institutions, showing it's so effective for anxiety and panic and all of that. So the one I mentioned on Rogan, again, I'll go back to holotropic breathwork. This is one that people get huge benefits from it. We know anecdotally that people have really enjoyed this and used it for mental health issues, but scientifically, there isn't a lot of research behind it. And what it is you sit in a room with about 20 other hippies. They're not all hippies, mostly hippies. And they blast music and you breathe as hard as you can for 3 hours. For 3 hours, as hard as you can. So obviously something's going to happen to your mind and body during this. And some people had told me before that you do this and it hyper oxygenates your brain so you can reach different planes. All of that is complete crap. What it does is it denies oxygen to your brain because it inhibits circulation. When we overbreathe, you get light in your head, right? Maybe your fingers go numb. That's from a decrease of circulation. Imagine doing that for 3 hours. A whole bunch of weird shit's going to happen. And it happened with me. I was drifting off into, the astral universe. And some people really had some severe freakouts, which was, it made that whole thing that happened on Capitol Hill look pretty mellow compared to what was happening, in the holotropic breathwork session. So.
You mentioned something at the beginning of the podcast when Andrew asked about breathing in through the nose and out through your mouth. And you said that like the exhale doesn't really matter. I think you mentioned something like that. But what I'm curious about real quick is as far as when you see all these different breathing techniques, for example, like Wim Hof, right? We were talking about that earlier, and he says, breathe whatever way you want to breathe, even if it's through your asshole, right? He mentions that doesn't matter. But if you're someone who is now trying to focus on being a better individual who breathes through their nose, right? In and out through their nose, and you're doing a technique like Wim Hof, or you're doing anything else like this, would it still be as effective if you were trying to focus on only using your nose, or with those types of breathing techniques where you're, trying to exhale really forcefully and fast? Should you be using your mouth with those techniques?
Great question. I've heard this a few times and actually just revised a section in the book to make this even more clear. So when I was saying exhaling through the mouth, it doesn't matter as much. So the most important thing is to be inhaling through your nose. Having said that, exhaling through your nose will have many more benefits than exhaling through your mouth, but it doesn't matter as much. So if you're out jogging and your nose is getting really stuffed up and you're getting sweaty and you're like, I cannot inhale and exhale through my mouth, you can exhale through your mouth with pursed lips. Like or ujjayi breathing, a slight constriction in your throat. it'll sound like that, because you don't want that air to exit so quickly. You want it to hang around for a little longer so you can extract more oxygen. We extract oxygen on the exhale as well, not just on the inhale. So to be clear, inhale and exhale through your nose as often as you can. Now, when you're doing an exercise like Wim Hof, Sudarshan Kriya, holotropic breathwork, whatever, I don't care how you're breathing. Wim doesn't care how you're breathing. Yogis don't care how you're breathing. This is an exercise, right? So how you're doing it for this exercise for 20 minutes, go for it, whatever relaxes you. It's like, you can imagine these exercises like going to the gym. You're not going to go to the gym for 24 hours a day, right? That's going to destroy your body. But you go to the gym for half an hour or an hour, and there's going to be huge benefits to doing that. So Wim just wants people to breathe, to get in touch with their breathing. I've talked with him several times. He's an amazing dude. He's done more to bring breathing awareness to people than I think anyone else in the modern age. And, you know, the rest of the time when he's not doing Wim Hof method, the only times we see him is up on stage. Breathe, motherfucker, you know, but the rest of the time he's got his mouth closed. He's breathing through his nose and he's humming, and he's breathing so slowly and in such a controlled way. We just don't see that side of him because that's the boring side. We see the fantastic superstar Wim when he's sitting in an ice bath for 2 hours, when he's really got to focus on his breathing.
Earlier,
go ahead.
I was going to say earlier you had mentioned those tongue exercises, and I know this might be a huge shocker, but I'm actually not as big as Mark and Nsima. I'm a little bit skinnier, but I am like 99% sure I have sleep apnea. My wife will push me over even though I have mouth tape on because I'm snoring with my mouth closed. But for us, like more slender guys, like I think there's that term nerd neck. You know, we kind of are trying to get close to the computer screen. Is there anything in addition that you know, skinnier guys can practice on to help with their breathing techniques?
Sure. So I'll bring on my guest here. He's been waiting very patiently. So sleep apnea can occur in various areas of the airway, right? Nasopharynx, oropharynx, a little further down. Most of it occurs around here, right? The oropharynx. So it really depends what your problem is or where you're having that resistance. And again, I can't offer a blanket prescription for everyone. Sleep tape works for a lot of people. Sometimes it doesn't work for them. What you can do are these oropharyngeal exercises. I know I mentioned that. Also, inspiratory muscle training can significantly decrease snoring and sleep apnea. And what this is, you can buy these things on Amazon. They're $20. It's a resistance trainer. You put it in your mouth and it's fitness for your lungs. And they've shown in various studies over like 30 years, this has a huge effect it can have a huge effect on performance as well, because it helps grow larger lungs, more fit lungs.
Sick.
And there's a reason why there was a study put out in Lancet journal where they found playing the didgeridoo. This is like this 40,000-year-old instrument, annoying as hell. If anyone, you know, if you ever had a roommate with one of those things, you want to just freaking kill them. But this is so effective for airway health because it takes a ton of pressure to play this thing. You're just
didgeridoo,
you know, and it helps to tone that airway. So I would, for you, I'm not saying this is absolutely going to work, but use the tape for one, inspiratory muscle training, raise the head of the bed about 6 inches. This is called incline bed therapy, and try sleeping on your side. And if you could record this with a pulse ox, I'd love to see what happens with you, because I've a pulse oximeter. A lot of people are doing this. They're sending me these reports, and these people who are suffering from severe sleep apnea are now down to 0. Again, I'm not guaranteeing anything for anyone. This stuff is free, and you're going to benefit from it anyway. So why not give it a go?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try. I know for sure if I'm sleeping on my back, that's like guaranteed. I'm going to, you know, tilt back and end up snoring my face off. But then if I roll over to a side, if I almost go like 3/4 to where my face is like closer, like aimed towards the pillow, that's when I can kind of minimize it. But yeah, I'll look into that that breathing device. Me and Nsima, we both like our eyes lit up, like, oh, performance, like, all right, let's kill two birds with one stone.
What exactly was the name of that device again? Like on Amazon?
It's Inspiratory muscle training. There's about 40 different devices. There's the $15 Chinese one that's going to fall apart after a week, and then there's the more fancy versions. I got one that's like $30. It's pretty sturdy. There's also something called Power Breathe, which is like $500, but it has a little monitor on it to show the adjustments for you. That's cool if people get off on that kind of stuff. I found that the manual thing works just as well, but whatever works for folks. And one thing I want to mention as well is it's hard for people when they're when they've grown accustomed to sleeping on their backs. It's hard to sleep on the side, but what can be of benefit is they used to do this like in the 50s. They would tape a little ping pong ball or a sock to the back. And after a couple weeks, you just don't want to sleep on your back that way. You're just like, oh, this isn't comfortable. You just learn to sleep on your side. And this can really have a huge impact on your sleep quality because you're able to sleep without that obstruction. And I can't tell you how damaging. You don't even need to be suffering from snoring and sleep apnea. Any obstruction in the airway is going to stress your body out and have downstream effects on your health. I
find this pretty interesting how you started to study breathing. But then also what we're talking about a lot of right here is not breathing, ending up with like some oxygen debt, especially to get you to some of those other places that you were talking about in the brain. What can oxygen debt do for us in terms of athletes, like just becoming more conditioned to having less oxygen, I guess, or being more conditioned in our training to be able to breathe in and out of the nose, and then maybe in times of extreme circumstance, breathe whatever way we have to.
So for the same reason why a lot of athletes go to altitude to train at altitude and build more blood, you don't have to go to altitude to get a lot of these benefits. What you have to do is to train yourself. I'm not saying this is fun. I tried to do it for a while and it's pretty heavy duty, but you have to train yourself to breathe less when you're working out. And you have to do this in a controlled way. So don't just try to go out and hold your breath, lifting weights or whatever. It's going to be a disaster. But if you do it with a breathing coach who really knows what they're doing, you can create more EPO, which creates more red blood cells, which allows you to have more fuel. You can carry more oxygen. I mean, Lance Armstrong got busted for shooting up EPO. That's what he got. He got busted for shooting up his own blood, so he could carry more oxygen. We can create these similar adaptations at sea level through something called hypoventilation training. And mark my words, in about 5 years, this stuff is going to be huge. It was huge about 50 years ago. The Russians were into it. It was huge in the 70s. The U.S. swim team was into it, and they won more golds, more medals than anyone else at the 76 Montreal Olympics. This is what they were doing. And this stuff is just coming out right now. They've been studying it in France. And not only is it good for performance to build red blood cells, it increases your anaerobic threshold. Another thing, it allows you to pull more energy from lactic acid in anaerobic states. And it conditions you to be able to push harder using less energy. So I think the real benefit here is it trains you to do more with less breath, so that when you're breathing normally, your body is accustomed to this and can push even harder, can go even faster. So the science on this is clear, not only for athletic performance, but they found you're able to lose a lot more weight with this training. It's also good for cardiac, respiratory system health. I mean, on and on. I included something like 10 studies in the back of the book. There's hundreds more beyond that.
What about practicing something along those lines with something that's real moderate or modest exercise, something like walking? Like, could we potentially incorporate some of this stuff with something like walking? Like maybe maybe we try to walk 20 steps holding our breath or something like that. Have you found anything like that to be beneficial, to be able to train, I guess, kind of while you're doing something that it's less intense?
Absolutely. So coaches in the 50s, and I've talked to a few people. It's cool. The book has come out now. I've heard from these people out of the woodwork, but they used to train track athletes. They would put a cup of water in their mouths, have them run around the track. They'd have to come back and spit the water in the cup. It had to be the same amount of water to condition them to breathe through their nose. And when you're breathing through the nose, you are going to be breathing less. This is your best monitor for how to breathe, right? So just breathing through the nose, that's probably 80% of the game. But beyond that, if you want to push that a little harder, people have also been doing this for decades and decades, is you would, you could call it a hypoventilation walking, or they have all these Buteyko training or whatever, so many different names, but you test yourself to see how many steps you can walk while holding your breath on an exhale. And don't do this like in a public place. You know, they say because you can get dizzy and like fall over. So I do it up in the park. I'll just exhale and walk 30 steps and then breathe again. And you'll be able to determine when you start getting really uncomfortable. You don't have to always push it to that level of extreme, I'm lightheaded. You can just do this, extending your exhales when you're jogging. Inhale to a count of 3, exhale to 6 when you're jogging. At the beginning, this is going to be uncomfortable. You're going to feel this need to breathe, but that need to breathe is not dictated by lack of oxygen, but an increase of CO2, which has so many benefits. So that's a long way of saying there's various ways to do this. Extending the exhale, counting your steps is a great one. And just learning how to breathe less when you're working out. What I've found is helpful. I have another pulse oximeter that just fits on my wrist, but you have one of these things as well. You can see when you're breathing less, you feel like, oh, there's no way I'm getting enough oxygen. That is rarely, if ever, the case. Your oxygen levels are fine. It's just your CO2 that's going up. And that's another reason why you start to feel warm. You start to feel this heat throughout your body. That's circulation. That's exactly what you want.
What should the pulse oximeter read? You were mentioning with Andrew with his sleep. What kind of number should you be looking at? Because those are very inexpensive too, and very easy to order off of Amazon. I think they're like $10 or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So this one's pretty clunky. You wouldn't want to wear this going to sleep. I mean, that would be a big pain in the butt, but they have some that are literally just a ring. It's just like the Oura ring. And it's recording your oxygen
the end
levels.
Of your finger, right? They just kind of pinch your finger. Those work well too.
Yeah, there's some I found. I tried one of those. I tried going to sleep like this, and I hated it. It felt like there was some snake. You know, you start to fall asleep, and then you're like, oh, there's a snake like biting me. So I prefer the ring version of it, which you don't even notice it. And so this is good to work out with as well, because you don't notice it. So your oxygen levels shouldn't be dropping below like 94%. Okay. Anything below that is you're not breathing enough.
It's telling you that you got a problem with your sleep. Like when you're sleeping, you're not breathing correctly if it's dropping below 94%.
Yeah. With sleep apnea, they want to see dips below 90%. But to me, 93, 94, there's an issue there. And what you find when you're wearing these is they give you a chart when you wake up in the morning, and you can see these dips where people with severe sleep apnea, they'll go down to like 80 or 70%, these huge dips, and then they'll go. I mean, imagine if you were doing that when you were awake for 8 hours, how you would feel. You'd feel terrible, because this is not an efficient way of getting oxygen. So I find these devices are fascinating. The idea that, you know, these things would have cost $100,000 10 years ago. Now you can buy them for $300, and you can see your breathing health throughout the day. I just think is amazing.
Just curious, for the ones that are rings, do you have any brands that you know are this is a pretty good one that you could suggest to us?
Yeah, I used one called the O2 Vibe, which I heard was discontinued. It looked like some Atari 2600 game. I mean, the UX was not so hot. LED screen, which I kind of liked about it. It looked like some from like 1978, like Logan's Run. But they discontinued that, and now it's just a ring, and it's called like something unimaginative like the O2 ring. It's made by Body Metrics, and I can vouch for this brand. This isn't like some crappy brand where they don't research this. These guys have a medical background and they are precise. Because a lot of pulse oxes, if it's $10 and it's coming from China, like, not all these things are FDA approved, but Body Metrics does the work. And I can definitely say that their products are very accurate. We've compared them with the 100,000 model items down at Stanford, and they were locked in.
Yeah, I'm very curious about this now. You know, everyone's wearing masks. We have to outside or in stores. And I always get really weird looks. And my lady says, you're embarrassing me, because I take my mask and I put it underneath my nose because I want to be able to breathe. I find that when I put that mask over my face, breathing through my nose is hard. It gets uncomfortable. I don't like it. Now, I'm curious, does the nose does have like things in it that help capture or block you from getting sicknesses or viruses, right? That, and also for all of our listeners, do you suggest that if they wear masks, they should just wear it around their mouth, but not their nose?
So I don't want to get too deep into mask politics.
Yeah.
That's not my jam, but I will offer some data and some science here. A lot of people wearing masks, they say, there's no way I'm getting enough oxygen here. I can't wear this thing. I'm going crazy. I need to breathe. I need oxygen. Oxygen is not the issue. I've seen various studies. They've looked at surgeons wear these things for 8 hours a day, every single day. You think they're not getting enough oxygen when they're doing neurosurgery, you know, on capillaries in the brain? Of course they are. So the studies have looked at various masks, from the 4-ply mask to the surgical mask. Oxygen is not the issue. What is happening here is you are getting a little more CO2, and CO2 is the trigger to breathe. So especially with people who have panic or anxiety problems, when they feel they're being denied a breath, they completely freak out, because that reminds them of having an attack, right? What happens when you have an asthma or anxiety attack? So it isn't. So we'll start with that with a mask situation, not an oxygen problem. And that little boost of CO2 can actually have a lot of benefits. Now we'll get to the nose here. You're 100% right. Let's bring my friend back on here. If you look at the nose, there are all of these structures here, right? And all of these structures are coated with cilia, these little hairs and mucus and all of these other things that allow you to filter out pathogens and bacteria and pollution and viruses. So not only that, but your nose will release 6 times more nitric oxide than breathing through your mouth. And nitric oxide, I'm sure you guys are familiar with all the benefits of nitric oxide. But one of the other benefits of it is it interacts directly with viruses. It kills viruses. So I don't want to say, you know, you're right and your lady's wrong. I'm definitely not going to get into that. But you can mention to her that you are able to, it looks like you're able to decrease a viral load and fight off more pathogens breathing through the nose. We know that. Is that going to stop you from getting COVID or from getting colds? No. Will it reduce that viral load? Probably. And this is what Dr. Louis Ignarro, who won the Nobel Prize in the 90s, has said. You need, especially now, breathe through your nose. And when you're wearing a mask, you have to be breathing through your nose too. You can't just default to mouth breathing.
Have you kind of always been this way? Like, have you always been kind of poking around and digging around for answers? I've heard that you have a car that runs off of like cooking oil and stuff. Are you just a very curious person? Are you kind of searching around for some maybe unconventional answers and things like that? You've always been into these kinds of things?
Well, I was a respectable citizen of society for too many years. I had a job where I was like wearing a tie and, you know, had a staff. I was a copy editor and was running the writing shop. And I broke away from that to become a freelance writer way late in life. Don't do this, anyone. It's a complete pain in the butt. In my 30s is when I said, I don't want to do this. I want to pursue magazine writing and book writing. And it was super hard to go from having a steady income to basically having no income and not knowing where your next check was coming. But at the end of that, the reason why I did it, and here's the answer to your question, is every day I'm able to wake up and be curious about stuff. And I've always been that way, but I've never had a job that allowed me to be curious. Most jobs don't want you to be curious, right? You start asking questions at most jobs, you're a pain in the ass. But I'm in a profession where that's what I'm supposed to do. And so once I start sniffing around and sense that there's a deeper story to something, I become completely obsessed with it. So book writing is not a clocking on for 6 hours, clocking off, and now I'm going to watch, Tiger King or whatever. All I do is read about it all night. I work on it all day, but it doesn't feel like work because one thing leads to another. And it's just, you're on this journey of digging up all of these clues to try to find the story. I can tell you guys have a lot of that as well from your questions where you're just like, wait, what? Why did our ancestors have straight teeth? And why are we all screwed up? What caused that? And how can we stop that from happening? And you see where this goes. It's just a domino effect. And it makes life interesting to me. And I absolutely love what I do because I'm able to ask these questions. And now I'm able to pick up the phone and talk to the leaders in the field and get the real data, get the real answers and provide it for other people, which is such a privilege. You mentioned that you're middle-aged now, and you mentioned earlier that you were 30 by the time you bounced out of that job. It must have been a rough time period in between that to make it to where you're at. Where did some of this start when you started writing? Like, did you start writing freelance, and were you like writing for free? Like, how'd you pick up gigs and jobs like to get your name known? And what was your first book? Yeah. So I was always writing, not always, but I discovered writing magazine articles as a way to sort of nourish my brain and nourish my soul. So when I got home from work, I would work on these articles. On weekends, I would work on them. I thought, what a cool opportunity it was an excuse to call random people up and to go into their worlds and learn about their worlds and come back out and to write about it. I never, ever thought this would be my full-time job. Never, because the money is terrible. It's so precarious. Magazine stories get cut, editors change. But finally, I got to the point where I had enough freelance work that I thought this would be the time if ever I was going to make my break. And already I was getting pretty late in the game. I had to do it. I had to go for it. And of course, what happened right when I did that is all of my freelance writing totally disappeared. And I was like, oh God, what did I do? But I kept plugging away at it. So during this time, God, the story's getting long. I'll try to speed it up here. Take your time with it. I think we talk a lot about, switching careers and different things like that, and trying to pursue things that keep you excited so that you can do it for a long time. And eventually, what we try to share with people is eventually you'll probably be really successful at it because it's something that you're highly interested in. It looks like it's working out for you. Yeah. And that's the thing. A lot of people say, and I think this is bad advice, when you hear parents saying to kids, you can be anything that you want. You can be an astronaut. You can be a president. You can be a rock star. Not true. You have to find the thing that you're naturally gifted in and then go into that all the way. How much would I love to play professional basketball? How much would I love to be in the Warriors, the great Golden State Warriors? It's never, ever going to happen. So this idea that you can do whatever you want as long as you work hard, garbage. You can do a lot of things, but you have to have the passion and you have to stick with it, and you have to be naturally gifted at that thing to begin with. I know this is not the message a lot of people want to hear, but you see people grinding away at something where they're just not that good, whether it's a musician or whether it's a sports person. They're never quite going to make it because that's not their thing that they're naturally gifted at. So I thought, I had been professionally writing advertisements, writing catalog copy, writing all this other crap. So I knew how to write okay, but I just never thought that I'd be able to make it in, actually doing this for a living. So during this time, my my uncle was this like old school playboy in Hollywood who had one of those little square houses with the little stilts, you know, in the Hollywood Hills. And he passed away, and I was going through all of his stuff. And, you know, he was like a 60s, 70s, had an orange Corvette and pantsuits and all that crap. And I found a bunch of his notes on like meditation and all this weird hippie stuff. So the reason I'm mentioning this is I took all that stuff and brought it home, and a friend who was in the book business at Chronicle Books saw it and was like, you should do like a little paperback version where you take all of these different methods, like one on each page, and do a little weird coffee table, like humor book about it. And I had zero money at this time. I was like, that sounds good. Well, will you buy it? And she's like, yeah, we'll give you an advance. So I put that book together. It's a humor science book. The science is real, but you know, it's just sort of a silly thing. And after that, I got sort of a taste. I was like, oh, you know, writing books is really the way to go. Magazine articles, they come out, they're around for 2 weeks, they're forgotten about. But books, you can focus years on one subject and really understand it, and they have a really long life. I mean, my first real book, nonfiction book, Deep, Freediving Renegade Science and What the Ocean Tells Us About Ourselves, that was put out about 6.5 years ago. Still getting letters, you know, about it. It's still being published in other countries. So it just has this long life, and there's something nicer to just be able to calmly focus on one thing for a few years at a time. I love it. I can't wait to go back into that cocoon and get back to work.
Yeah. Do you have to get all weird with your writing? Do you need to like go to like a cabin and be by yourself and like be isolated for like a year, and the beard starts getting really gnarly and the hair starts going crazy?
I would love to say that cliche isn't true, but I have to be honest with you. We got a little cabin up in Amador in a population. 100 people lived in this little town. It's called Volcano, about 2 hours away from San Francisco. And, you know, I always called complete BS on people who did that. I was like, oh, this is so precious that you have to go to your little cabin, your little quill pen, and you have your little riding sweater on, your slippers. And I didn't go that far, but there's something about having extremely sketchy internet, about being completely isolated, that you're able to go very deep within. You know, I was getting cabin fever a lot up there, and I wasn't up there full time. I would go up there for like a 7-day stint and then come back and be normal again and go up there. But the poor people at this Starbucks, which was about 20 minutes away, had to see me every day sit in the same corner, you know, with earplugs in my ears and just grinding away. So whenever the pandemic lightens up, I need to go back there and give them a book and say, thanks for letting me sit here, you know, sipping one espresso for 4 hours every day.
I recently just got a VR headset, and it's freaking incredible. And once I wrap my head around how much, like, I can't even explain it. So when I do, I will talk about it a lot on this podcast. But actually, one of the chapters in Deep turned into a VR film. How did that come to be? And was it like a pain in the ass, or how was that whole experience?
Yeah, wow. This is the first time I've ever been asked about this.
Oh, dude, any excuse.
I got something new to talk.
Any excuse I can talk about VR stuff, I'm going to just jump on it right now. But this is really cool because I did see a little trailer of it, and I just I can't wait. I'm so new to it. I can't figure out how I'm even going to watch it, but I will do it tonight because I'm excited for it.
It's out for free on the New York Times website. It's out for free on a site called Within, so you can check that out. So that book Deep was looking at the human connection to the human body from the very surface of the ocean to the very bottom of the deepest sea. So not only with free diving, but with magnetoreception, this, like, how do sharks and dolphins and whales make their way around the planet from one beach to the other and return again? They do so because they have these little magnetoreceptive cells in their heads, which are able to home in on the Earth's magnetic field. I mean, this is
out of here.
Like GPS
sounds so fake, right? I mean, it's unbelievable the stuff animals can do.
Humans have the same thing. Wow. This is not some Marvel Comics bullshit. This is studied at Caltech. So that's what this book was looking, each chapter, and how do like dolphins and whales see in a completely black ocean? They see by sending out these clicks and waiting for the echo of those clicks to come back, something called echolocation. Humans can do that as well. And two of my good friends, Brian,
where's my echolocation?
You can check out Daniel Kish. This guy, completely blind, he's riding his bike through LA, clicking, and he can see with his clicks. So have him on. This guy's gonna blow your mind. So anyway, but back to the question here about VR. So once Deep came out, I was given the opportunity to do a short VR thing with the New York Times to try to bring people into the water to experience freediving, because most of us, when we hear about freediving, we think of like this daredevil stuff where people are coming out with blood all over their face and passed out. And that's not the freediving that I experience and that the vast majority of people around the world experience. This is the most deep, soulful underwater meditation you can have, because you can't freedive if you're anxious, if you're stressed out. You can only do it by controlling your breath, controlling your heart rate, and allowing your body just to be enveloped in the ocean. And it's the most beautiful, calming thing. And it's the one thing I miss most about this stupid pandemic is I can't get out in the water and do this. But we were able to take VR cameras and allow people to go into this silent world where you're freediving, zero gravity. You can go in any direction you want. And when you're silent like this, other sea life doesn't look at you as a threat. They look at you as part of the natural environment. So sharks come up to you, dolphins come up to you, whales come up to you, and they start interacting. Whales will send clicks, their communication clicks. Dolphins will send communication clicks because they think you're another marine mammal. And it's just the most, I won't get too new agey here, but it's the most sort of deeply touching and affecting thing I've ever done in my life. And so we were able to bring VR cameras down and share these experiences with people. Some people really dug it. Other people had to immediately take the headset off because the idea of being underwater 100 feet deep without a scuba tank freaked them out so completely. And the VR is so realistic that they couldn't deal with it. But hopefully that won't be your experience. I'd be curious to know what you think about it.
Yeah, no, I'll reach out. I'll let you know what I think, and then I'll bring in my headset so Mark and Nsima can check it out too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
How are you able to hold your breath for so long? That seems to be, like a mystery to a lot of people who have tried to hold their breath. Just as a kid, you try to hold your breath against your buddy, or you try to swim X amount of length in a pool holding your breath. And, a lot of us are lucky if we make it 15 seconds, 30 seconds, you get into a panic and you're like, I need to breathe again. How do you train that?
Breath holding is not a physical thing. It's a mental thing. So you have to train the mind. Anyone in reasonable health can hold their breath easily within about an hour of instruction, 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes. I've seen 4 minutes. From zero breath hold experience before to 4 minutes within about an hour. So you guys are fit guys. You understand how your bodies work. You guys could probably hold your breath for 3 minutes, 4 minutes within about an hour. It's about learning how to accept the feeling and acknowledging that feeling of that need to breathe is not dictated by oxygen. There's plenty of oxygen. It's that CO2 that's coming up. And it's using your mind to control your heart rate. So the slower your heart is beating, the less oxygen you're going to be consuming, right? So you have to calm yourself completely. If you look at yogis or other meditators, some of these people, when they really enter into the zone, are breathing about 2 times a minute. So they're barely breathing at all. And once you get into that state, you feel like you can hold your breath forever because you're allowing your mind to truly connect with your body and all of its functions. So once you enable yourself to do that and land, then you can try it out in the water. And I want to be clear, I'm not telling anyone to go into your pool right now and hold your breath as long as you can. That's a recipe for freaking disaster. You need to do this in a very careful and controlled way. And if you do it with a proper instructor, this stuff will blow your mind. I mean, I never thought I would be able to float around in 0 G's. I don't have enough money to go into space or whatever, but you can do this in the ocean. And to me, it's a lot more enriching than it would be in space, because you're surrounded by other sea life that accepts you as one of them and comes around and swirls around you. It's just the coolest thing I've ever done.
As far as that breath holding, I was curious, because when people do Wim Hof, after you do it, there's a period where you hold your breath for as long as you can. And as you're doing it more, you'll start to be able to hold your breath for 2 minutes, and you'll notice you'll be able to hold your breath for 3 minutes. But in your case, is this like, without doing those exercises, you could just sit there and then hold your breath for that amount of time?
So the first part of the exercises is to really engage your full lung capacity. So a lot of us are engaging maybe 30, 40%. Fit people, maybe a teeny bit more than that, but not much. So the first exercises are just traditional yoga exercises. Stretch like this, and I'm going to fully engage this side, right? I'm going to fully engage this lung, and then I'm going to engage this lung, and then I'm going to loosen up this rib cage. So the lungs, if we didn't have this rib cage here, they could inflate and be enormous. So it's about making this rib cage flexible. And after you do that, or while you're doing that, you condition your mind to slow everything down and to accept that what is happening, what you are doing, is completely natural. There's a reason why we're built with all of these. They're called mammalian dive reflexes. So the moment you enter into water, your heart rate goes down 20%. Blood starts rushing from your extremities into your core, and you start to become a marine mammal. And the deeper you go, the more triggers click on. Your spleen releases more oxygenated blood. So this is exactly what allows seals and dolphins and whales to dive hundreds or thousands of feet. Humans have these same abilities, and it's just by becoming acclimated to how they feel and turning them on that you're able to hold your breath for so long. And let me tell you, when you start feeling your spleen releasing oxygenated blood and your heart lowering when you're in the water, you start feeling like a different animal. And it's such a complete trip, but this is how we evolved. It's just so few of us are in touch with this right now, because we don't need to be. We don't need to dive to get food anymore. We can go to freaking Long John Silver's to get cod. We don't have to hunt or do anything. And that's part of the problem.
What's going on with this car that runs on your cooking oil over there?
Man, we're going from dolphin echolocation, right? I love it. I love it. So this is another privilege and pleasure. When you write about stuff, as I mentioned before, you're able to go into these different worlds and understand a different viewpoint from your own, and to look at life differently. So one of the earliest assignments I got with the San Francisco Chronicle, a cover feature, which I was so completely freaked out about, took me a while to write this thing. I heard about these hippies that were going to the back of fast food restaurants and taking all of their used cooking oil and then putting it in their cars. And all of these hippies were also buying up these old 70s Mercedes, which were usually associated with really snotty rich people. I know, the 300 series, 300Ds, there was millions of these things made. And I'm in San Francisco, so I'm seeing, this dude with a braided beard cruising around in this really sick Mercedes. And I'm just like, what is going on here? You should be in a VW bus, not in a Mercedes. But it turned out that they were able to convert these Mercedes to run on vegetable oil. And so I contacted them. I said, hey, I want to write a story about you guys. And they said, cool, come along. And they took me along, stealing, not really stealing, because it's just a waste product. They use vegetable oil, the back of skanky restaurants, and they pump that in, they'd filter it, and you do these slight conversions to your car. It doesn't take much, because these old Mercedes, the motors are just like, they're built like freaking tanks. And so they can run on trash, and that's what used vegetable oil is. And so after I wrote about these guys, I actually found that the first diesel motors invented by Rudolf Diesel were designed to run on peanut oil. That's what they were never designed to run on fuel. And of course, the petrol companies said, oh, we can't have people using free gas. We need to make these run on diesel. But you can still convert these things. You can still put peanut oil in a VW TDI, and especially in a Mercedes, because the motors are so strong. So after I wrote about that, I said, shit, I need to get one of these cars. And at that time, this was before a lot of people were hip to this, and people were selling them for like $2,000 for this gorgeous leather interior Mercedes diesel, because no one wanted these things. And I converted the car and ran it on vegetable oil and had the whole setup in my garage. And the cool thing was I was picking up my vegetable oil from an Indian food restaurant. So whoever was behind me just got this blast of curry the whole time. That's the side benefit from it.
Is there... Oh,
it doesn't take any gasoline at all. It just runs off that.
So the way I converted that car is I had a 2-tank system. Now we're really getting into the specifics here, because when it gets cold, vegetable oil can congeal very easily. So what you want to do is to have a tank in the back of your trunk and to also use the original gas tank and have diesel or biodiesel in that. So at the end of driving this, you just want to flush out the motor. It's kind of like, if a bunch of fat and other crap gets stuck in your arteries, it's gonna build up pressure and it's gonna make it harder. The same thing can happen in your fuel lines. So as long as you flush it out with biodiesel or diesel, you're gonna be fine. But for years and years, I was driving around and barely spending anything on gas, and it's something empowering to think you're able to drive and you're not having to pay X amount of dollars per day. You're just completely moving around the system with the technology that's been around for 100 years, but we've just forgotten about it.
Is this something that, because I mean, honestly, this is like the first time I've really heard of this, but, people are thinking the future is going to be going electric. That's what the trend seems to be. But other than gas, is this something that for a mass population could be better than gas?
Well, not if the oil companies are going to have their way, and they pretty much had their way. Okay. So about 10 years ago, biodiesel was this huge thing. It still is pretty big. A lot of public buses run on biodiesel. People are still running on biodiesel. But in my view, biodiesel is a great way of converting old cars to run on a much more efficient fuel, much more responsible fuel. But if you're going to drive in a new car, I think electric is the way to go, especially if you can do electric with solar. I mean, how empowering would that be? You're off the grid. Like, no one is controlling how you're driving or what you're paying for. And I think that combination, if you're able to get solar on your house and charge your car up, that's the way to go. When I wrote this story, it was about 10 years ago. And this was really before electric cars were coming out. A few Priuses were out, but that's it. So another thing that people should consider, the real eco thing to do is to take older stuff and convert them to be cleaner. A lot of people think, I need to buy a new car, need to buy a new washer, need to buy a new this or that. But the resources it takes to create something new, especially a car, just a new car is like 2 years worth of gas and CO2. Right. So I'm much more interested, if we're talking about electric cars, you've tapped into another hobby of mine, and just be careful now, because I'm just going to blather about this as much as I can. The most efficient thing to do, and this is something I hope to do in the next couple of years, is to take an old car and convert it to electric. And there's a few kits coming out right now. Like, I want to take my Mercedes that's running off of veg oil, and put an old Tesla motor and Tesla battery in that, to have this old car that goes to 0 to 60 in about 2 hours, to have that thing now kicking ass all over the place, I think would be really fun. So that's something I was just talking to my wife about last night. She was just rolling her eyes. She's like, why are you making this difficult? Just buy a Prius. Great. I said, no, let's get an old weird car and convert it to electric.
Wow. I guess I do want to go back to the breathing thing for a minute. But I was really curious because in your book, you had a lot of crazy breathing feats that were done by other people. But what would you say, maybe it's something that hasn't been in the book, or maybe it's something that you found later afterwards. What are a few or one of just the wildest things that you've seen somebody be able to accomplish that from an individual that's just focused on breathing for a long time? What are what is like the craziest or some of the craziest things you've seen that we would think is impossible?
The most inspiring stories for me wasn't just the science and wasn't the data. It's talking to these individuals who were chronically sick for so long, for decades. They were on a cocktail of different drugs. They went and saw 12 different people, told them 12 different things. They were told that whatever they had was incurable and just to deal with it. To find these people who were able to heal themselves in a measured way to the point where they no longer suffer from any of the symptoms of these diseases they had before just blew my mind. Like, the human body's capacity to heal itself is incredible and is completely underutilized. We think we're leaning on so many of these modern inventions, which are amazing, man. I'm a big fan of antibiotics and vaccines and Western medicine. And if I get in a car crash, the last thing I want is to go to acupuncture or to breathe. I want to go to the hospital and have someone fix me up, like, big time. But at the same time, for these chronic problems, these problems that are mostly tied to inflammation, we've done a really bad job of treating the core problem. And I think one of the most inspiring stories I heard from this incredible dude, his name is Maurice DeBar. He was like the Wim Hof before Wim Hof. So in the 30s, he was a kid. He was extremely sick, chronic lung problems. He was in the hospital for years. They were going in to remove his lungs, to actually clip them out. And a missionary came by his hospital bed and said, "Hey, I've heard about this thing. It's called yoga. And there's these things where you can breathe and it can really help bolster your immune function and can help restore you. I've seen these people do it up in the Himalayas." And he started breathing and he said, "No, I don't want the surgery." He not only breathed himself back to perfect health, but he developed this superhuman ability to sit in the snow for hours at a time, not get frostbite or hypothermia. In his 70s, he went on a bicycling trip alone in the Himalayas at elevations of like 18,000 feet. He's 92 now, and this guy's still alive. He's basically left for dead when he was a kid. And he's taught thousands and thousands of people this, but he hates publicity, right? So he's just working in his own little corner to help change people's lives for breathing. So it's those personal stories and hearing from these people's experiences of how they've been able to overcome quote unquote impossible things by tuning into their body. And I want to be clear that I'm not saying breathing is going to do everything for everyone, but it is as important as what we eat and how much we exercise easily. And so it should really be considered alongside of those things whenever we're talking about health or lifespan.
Appreciate your time today. You've been very kind and generous with it. Where can people get your book, and do you have a new book on the horizon?
My website is mrjamesnestor.com. You can go there. My publisher allowed me to put all of the scientific references for free on the website because I know this crap sounds unbelievable, but you can see for yourself. There's also x-rays up there and videos and interviews with professors at Stanford and more, all on the website. I'm trying to get better at this thing called Instagram, which for old guys is been a bit of a challenge, but my handle is Mr. James Nestor. And I do have another book idea. I've had zero time to research it. It's on the horizon, and I can't wait to get back out into the field whenever this pandemic thing lightens up and to go speak with some freaks and get back in the labs and measuring stuff.
Awesome. Thanks again for your time. Appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, you guys. Really appreciate it. Take care.
You too.
And he really gave us a lot of like tangible stuff to do and even things to like purchase, you know, like a lot of different products, like the pulse oximeter thing. Like he did mention, like they might not be as accurate if you have some of the, but mine matches up with my Apple Watch. You know,
you have a ring?
No, I just have a little thing that clips on your finger, and it was $15 from Amazon, and the heart rate and the heart rate is dead on with the Apple Watch. So
Okay.
I mean, there's at least some accuracy to it, but I've never really heard a lot of the stuff that he said. Like some of the stuff he said was so simple, and it's kind of frustrating sometimes. You know, you're just trying to get some simple answers for people, for people and from people. And he gave us a lot of simple stuff. Hey, raise the head of your bed. You know, what do you say, 6 inches or something like that? I mean, just that's so simple that why wouldn't you try it if you're having trouble sleeping or if you're having sleep apnea? The pulse oximeter, using that and seeing if you're below 94%. Why wouldn't you try that? Like if you have something that you're suffering from, sometimes some of the situations are, well, you have to go to a doctor and it's got to be a specialist, and there's probably not, and you try to like look it up. There's nobody in your area. You're like, yeah, I don't know. And then you forget about it. And then you go on suffering with whatever issue it is that you have. Because it's like the barrier of entry is great. But with the things he suggested, they were all very reasonable.
Like the inspiratory muscle training thing that when Andrew asked that question, and it's not even that expensive.
Yeah,
like
I found a couple of them on Amazon, like $30-40.
Dude, like I want that now. Right? I want my lungs to be huge.
Chewing on some gum doesn't seem like, I mean, why not just try it? Like how much can the gum possibly cost?
The gum is cheap. Family gum is super cheap.
Yeah.
Or just chew regular gum with ice. That shit gets really stiff.
Deep throating that he talked about, I don't know if I'll be working on that anytime soon, but you never know. Could increase my stock for multiple reasons. You never know.
It could.
No, the awesome thing about this podcast or this specific one is because I heard him on Rogan, I heard him on with Patrick McEwen, and I heard him on High Intensity Health. What's his name?
Yeah, he's been on.
Yeah, but I heard all those podcasts, and there are things in this episode that I haven't heard him talk about, which is really awesome. Like there's so many things that he knows about breathing, and we were able to dig out a lot of it. So this is a lot of you guys are going to get a lot from this episode. It was awesome. Yeah.
What was the name of that machine? Inspiratory or
that's all I have is
something like that.
Inspiratory muscle training.
There you go. He said it right.
I can't enunciate that.
It seems all educated and shit.
Yeah. Well, he's been nasal breathing longer than me, so
oral pharyngeal.
Yeah.
What was? Yeah. Anyway, I don't even know what that was in reference to. Oral pharyngeal. What he said something like that.
I think that had to do with your airway.
Yeah.
Yep.
It had to do with breathing.
Yes. Yes. But man, God, this is so good. This is so good, man.
And I like that he, kind of was like, there's some of those techniques on YouTube, but it's all bullshit. Like he just straight called it out. He's like, go, get the real information from these, resources.
Yeah. When you look up like mewing stuff, like there's some cool stuff about it, but you'll see some guys on YouTube. Okay. So they're trying to take advantage of the whole mewing thing. They're like, my jaw has increased by 10%. Look at this before and after. And then their new jaw's like, but
and I think one of the take homes from this podcast that I got, that he did mention some things that you can buy. He did mention some stuff, but like you go back to the basics, breathe through your nose, eat some hard food here and there, eat some carrots, eat some celery, eat some steak, chew your, take your time, chew your food. And even while you're chewing your food and working on that, breathe through your nose, try to relax. Like, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes like I'm not thinking, I'm eating. So I'm so pumped about eating that I'm, eating like a dog, and you're kind of like ferocious over it, which there's no real reason to, and no one's going to come and steal your food. Just chill. And like, maybe by doing some of that, maybe you digest it a little bit better. I mean, there is research that talks about that. Chew your food until it becomes kind of a liquid. You don't need to be shoveling it down. There's no real emergency. But yeah, just going back to all the basics that he talked about throughout the show, there are breathing techniques. There are some things that you can buy. There's a bunch of different things you can do. But if you forget to do any of that, just go back to the basics and say, hey, you know what? I need to just figure out a way to breathe in and out of my nose a little bit more.
Impeccable timing with the like breastfeeding and all that stuff, because like I looked up a bunch of the resources that he pointed us towards, and the what's it called, the baby led weaning, Yeah, I can't wait to share that with Steph, because there's some, like, it explains everything in there on that website, like why you would want to go from breastfeeding straight to solid food.
Yeah.
Breastfeeding and things like that are really, it's some weird stuff. Like no one ever shares with you that process, like, even though the process is natural, it's not easy. Like, it's hard, you know? So I like what he said. He's like, hey, I'm a guy, so I'm not going to be like pressing people. People go through a really, really hard time trying to feed their baby that way. And it's unfortunate. Like, it doesn't just boom, you know, happen real quickly for everybody. But I know my wife, you know, she really, you know, wanted that to happen. And so she made it happen, but it wasn't without sacrifice. I mean, it's annoying. It's you're hooked to this person for X amount of hours and you have to commit to it. No one else can help. You know, how about that assignment? Like, all right, you had this baby, like, good job cranking it out there, mom. Like, you went through like the hardest thing ever. Okay, now, you know, for the next however long you decide you're going to breastfeed for, you're literally attached at the hip with this person, and no one else can assist or really help with that. I mean, you can like pump, and, you know, they can use a bottle, but it's, you know, it's you know, it's a giant pain in the ass, giant thing to have to commit to.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when, you know, our dogs still wake us up in the middle of the night to you know, go to the bathroom. I can do that 100% by myself, but you're right. I mean, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, if the dog comes in and bothers both you guys, you can say, oh, I got it. Yeah. You know, kids crying in the middle of the night, you can only do so much for it.
Yeah. This episode's going to save a lot of parents' money, though. Like, new parents or parents of younger kids, if they're able to, you know, make some changes to their diets or make some changes to their habits, you might not have to get your kid braces.
Yeah. Or how pumped, you know, or is your kid going to be if you say, hey, when you watch TV, you have to be chewing gum? They're going to be like, oh, that thing that tastes incredible. Okay.
Or even just like, it, you know, that's cool that you enjoy watching TV, but can you do it with your mouth closed? You know, like, sit up straight, or, you know, if you're going to be upside down, make sure your posture is good when you're upside down. Because kids do all kinds of weird shit. They just like plop down and you're like, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. Like, Jasmine would like sit, her back would be on the floor, but her legs would be on the couch, and she would just watch an entire like show that way.
Yeah, and she's like this.
Yeah. Like, like, why don't you? And, all right, cool.
Yeah.
And then you turn around and you look back and she's in, like, you know, she's hanging from the roof or something. You know, like, it's just, they move.
Yeah.
Take us on out of here, Andrew.
I will. Thank you, everybody, for checking out today's episode. Please share it with somebody, because this was freaking incredible, and I'll be really upset if this isn't one of our most listened to and viewed episodes, because this shit was amazing. Huge shout out and thank you to Piedmontese for sponsoring this episode. Links to Piedmontese down in the description below. Use promo code Power Project for 25% off your order, and if your order is $99 or more, you get free 2-day shipping. Please make sure you're following the podcast at Mark Bell's Power Project on Instagram and at MB Power Project on Twitter. Check out the new Power Project newsletter, also down in the description below. My Instagram and Twitter is at I am Andrew Z. Nsima, where are you at?
At Nsima Inyang on Instagram and YouTube, at Nsima Inyang on Twitter. Mark?
At Mark Smelly Bell. Strength is never weakness, weakness never strength. Catch you guys later.